Well, Daniel, another interesting thing happening there in Germany. Today is the last flight for the troubled Air Berlin. Now, would you be missing this carrier? Would it be a tearful goodbye from passengers and, of course, the investors? And why?
Well, I've been many times on Air Berlin in the past, and what I'm going to miss, and what most likely many passengers are also going to miss, whenever you have finished, when you finished an Air Berlin flight and you were deboarding, you got a nice little present. It was a little heart of chocolate. So that's what is going to miss. The last Air Berlin flight is going to land tonight at around 11 p.m. at Berlin's Tegel Airport. I mean, this has been a very sad story for investors, of course, who were invested in those Air Berlin shares. They lost dramatically. Right now, at the end, the share price was just about 30 or 40 cents. So lots of people lost money. Also, on the other hand, we have passengers, for example, in the past, who were having problems with their luggage or wanted to get money because Air Berlin was delayed. They are also not going to see any kind of money. Then I can, just talk about myself. I had about 80 or 90,000 bonus miles of Air Berlin, and pretty much everybody who still had those miles is now really having just a few options, what to do with those miles. So it's a very sad story for customers. But on the other hand, you, of course, cannot forget those 1,000 employees of Air Berlin who at this point still don't know what's going to happen with their jobs. Some of them will have the opportunity to work for Lufthansa's low-cost carrier division Eurowings, but mostly people working in the administrative part or at the checking desk, they really have to look for a new job after today.
Oh, poor you, Daniel. You just have to lose those miles. Anyway, Daniel, I'll leave it at that. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. I'll move on now to Asia, where most major Asian indices closed higher in Friday trade as the euro extended losses after Thursday's news from the European Central Bank that followed U.S. stocks closing mostly higher, and then several big-name tech companies reporting expectations topping results. Friday morning saw the Nikkei 225 tack on 1.24%. Across the Korean Strait, the Kospi rose 0.64%. The Australian ASX 200 declined 0.22%. The Hang Seng Index rose 0.6% as investors digested quarterly earnings report from top Chinese companies. Mainland markets were mixed, even though the blue chip CSI 300 index rose 0.71% to its highest levels since 2015. The Shanghai Composite closed up 0.26%, and the Shenzhen Composite shed 0.337%. To other market news, a bid for an inaugural 6 billion city energy bond being issued by Ghana will close on Friday. That's today, a day later than scheduled due to high investor interest. The government is issuing the bonds in 7-year and 10-year maturities as part of plans to raise 10 billion cedis to settle debts owed by state power utilities to banks and bulk oil distributors. The paper, for which bids opened on Tuesday, differs from standard sovereign issues by being backed by ESLA, a government-sponsored vehicle set up to raise fresh funds to clear the debts. Initial pricing guidance for the 7-year tranche was 17.7% to 19%, while the 10-year was pegged at 17.8% to 19.5%. Our settlement of the bonds has also been shifted to Wednesday from Monday to allow investors enough time to process payments after pricing on Friday. Ghana named Standard Chartered Bank and local lender Fidelity as lead managers for the bond in June. Well, we'll go back now to the Wall Street to see how the futures numbers are doing there. The U.S. stock index futures pointing to a higher open on Friday as investors turned their attention to another big batch of earnings and key economic releases. On the final trading day of the week, corporate earnings continue to pour in, with several key brands gearing up to release their latest financial reports. Now, Jill Maladrino, my colleague in New York, has more to tell us. Good morning, Jill. Earnings season is in full swing as the market continues to trade relatively close to the highs. What's the buzz? Oh, we seem to have lost audio there with Jill. We'll move on now to Tanzania, where Vodacom Tanzania PLC, majority owned by South Africa's Vodacom Group, has sold its stake in a local unit of Hillots Towers Africa for $58.5 million. It sold its 24.06% stake in Hillots Towers Tanzania Limited to that company's parent company, HTA Holdings. Vodacom Tanzania, which is listed on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, says the transaction would result in an estimated profit before tax of more than 120 billion shillings. Tanzania's telecoms and fair competition regulators have approved the deal. Vodacom Tanzania sold 25% of its shares on the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange in August, in line with the government's mandatory listing rules for telecoms companies, raising around $213 million. International investors bought 40% of the shares in the initial public offering, which was fully subscribed. And South Africa's biggest cement producer, PPC, says it had received an expression of interest from Lafarge Holcim, which is planning a combination of some of its African assets. According to a statement from the company, Lafarge, which is headquartered in Switzerland, is expected to submit a firm offer in November as it contemplates a deal which could include a partial cash offer and a special dividend to PPC shareholders. And in Chad, that country has hired Rothschild & Company to advise it on restructuring its external debt, a more than $1 billion loan from oil trader Glencore. The International Monetary Fund has said the debt held by Chad, one of the world's poorest nations that relies heavily on oil revenues, was unsustainable without restructuring the commercial external portion. An agreement on a restructuring had been expected to be completed last month. The parties involved were aiming for the end of the year or early 2018. The Glencore loan accounted for 98% of Chad's $1.4 billion external commercial debt at the end of 2016. According to the IMF, the World Bank estimated Chad's total gross domestic product last year at about $9.6 billion. Glencore began lending to Chad in exchange for crude in 2013 with a $600 million three-year repayment, followed by a $1.45 billion oil repayment in 2014 to finance the state oil firm's purchase of Chevron's oil assets in the country. We'll take a quick break, and when we return, we will be talking to our correspondent at the London Stock Exchange on the Nigerian Banking and Investment Forum going on there. To stay with us.